Let the world around you slowly dissolve into the quiet, and let your breath become deep and serene, like gentle waves rocking a small boat upon a boundless ocean of tranquility. In this space, where the cares of the day lose their weight and drift away like clouds beyond the horizon, we will begin a barely audible journey. This is not a voyage to distant lands, but a descent into the depths of thought, into those quiet coves where great questions are born. And tonight, we will drift toward the source of one of the oldest and most essential questions humanity has ever asked itself. The question is simple, yet its depths reach to the very heart of the universe. It sounds like this: what is justice? There is no need to rush for an answer. It is better to listen to the question itself. It is like a quiet, majestic music that has echoed through the centuries. It has resonated in the rustle of leaves in the olive groves of ancient Greece, reflected from the marble columns of magnificent temples, and whispered in the stillness of the night as philosophers, wrapped in their cloaks, gazed at the stars, searching in the celestial harmony for an answer to earthly troubles. Justice. It is a word we hear so often. We long for it, we demand it, and sometimes we despair in it. But what is it, really? Is it merely a set of rules written in thick books of law? Is it a kind of equality where everyone receives the same piece of bread? Or perhaps, is it retribution where evil is punished and good is rewarded? Imagine a quiet evening in Athens more than 2,000 years ago. The air is thick and warm, woven with the scents of flowers and cypress trees. Somewhere in the city square, the agora, or in a cozy courtyard, a group of people is gathering. Among them is one man, not very striking in appearance, perhaps a little clumsy, but with eyes that shine with an incredible curiosity and wisdom. His name is Socrates. He does not teach, nor does he preach. He simply asks. He might approach a respected general and ask, "You say that justice is courage on the field of battle, but is courage always just?" He turns to a wealthy merchant. "You say that justice is always to speak the truth and to return what is owed, but tell me, would it be just to return a weapon to a friend who has lost his mind and intends to do harm?" Socrates, like a masterful sculptor, chipped away layer by layer at all the simple common answers. He showed people that their notions of justice were merely shadows, blurred images of the true idea. He gave no ready-made answers. No, he did something far more valuable. He compelled people to think, to seek, to doubt. He invited them on a shared journey toward truth, into the labyrinths of their own souls. Beside him, eagerly absorbing every word, stood his student, a young man of noble birth, with broad shoulders and an even broader view of the world. His name was Plato, and the tragic fate of his teacher, the unjust trial and the sentence of death, was forever etched upon his heart. How could it be that the most just man in Athens was condemned as a criminal? This question became Plato's life's work. The search for true justice became his mission. And so, in the quiet of his philosophical school, the Academy, in the shade of the olive trees, Plato took this question like a precious but uncut stone and began to give it form. He understood that the answer could not be found on the bustling streets or in the halls of court. It had to be sought in the world of pure thought. Plato invites us to imagine a conversation. In this conversation, his wise teacher, Socrates, continues his search. He meets different people, and each one offers their own definition of justice. One says, justice is simply the will of the stronger. Whoever holds power decides what is just and what is not. Laws are written for the benefit of the rulers. This idea sounds familiar, does it not? It is cold and cynical, but Socrates, through Plato's words, gently objects. He says, "Let us consider, does a true physician care for his own benefit, or for the health of his patient? Does a skilled captain of a ship think of himself, or of the safety of his crew and vessel? In the same way, a true ruler, wise and just, cares not for himself, but for the well-being of those entrusted to him. His art is the art of care. Therefore, justice cannot be merely the will of the strong." Another companion suggests, "Justice is to do good to our friends and harm to our enemies." This seems so natural, so human, but here too Plato stops us. "Wait," he says, "can a just person truly cause harm? If we harm a horse, it becomes a worse horse. If we harm a dog, it becomes a worse dog. If we cause harm to a person, does he not become worse, less just? True justice, like the sun, cannot radiate darkness. Its very nature is to create good, to improve, not to destroy. It cannot be a source of harm." All of these familiar answers crumble like castles of sand in a breath of wind, and we are left in the quiet, in a state of not knowing. We sense that justice is something much larger, something far deeper. And here, Plato makes a move of genius. He says, "It is difficult for us to make out the letters of justice in the soul of a single person, for they are too small. Let us try to read the same inscription, but in larger letters. Let us see what justice looks like, not in one person, but in an entire society. Let us in our minds build an ideal state." This is an invitation to become the architects of a perfect city, not of stone and marble, but of pure thought, of ideas, and of dreams. Plato proposes that we close our eyes and imagine a society where everything is arranged correctly, harmoniously, perfectly, where every person, like a note in a grand symphony, sounds in their proper place, in complete harmony with all the others. The search for justice transforms from an abstract question into a creative process. We are no longer searching for a definition in a dictionary. We are beginning to create a world in which justice will not be just a law, but the very air its citizens breathe. It will be harmony, order, and beauty. This is where it all began, from a simple question, born under the sky of ancient Greece, from the pain of the unjust death of a wise man, and from the incredible dream of his student to build in the realm of reason a city that would stand as an eternal beacon for all who seek the light of truth. This search is not a dry theory. It is a lullaby for a soul that yearns for order. It is a quiet melody that reminds us that deep inside each of us there is a built-in compass, always pointing toward the pole of harmony. And though the world around us may be chaotic and unjust, in the quiet of our own hearts, we can always begin the construction of our own ideal city, surrendering to this soothing dream as it guides us into a world of deep, silent sleep. After the simpler definitions of justice had crumbled and scattered like castles of sand, philosophical thought turned toward a grander design. To perceive the elusive nature of virtue within a single person, it was proposed that we first build, in our imagination, an entire state, perfect and harmonious, for what is barely visible in the small becomes clear and magnificent in the large. This idea, this analogy, is the key to all the thought that follows. It is like a quiet, secret passage that leads to a treasury of understanding. If you imagine the human soul as a single, intricately woven thread, than to discern its pattern, its true color, its strength, is an immensely difficult task. But the state is a vast tapestry woven from thousands of such threads, and by looking at the overall design of the tapestry, at its colors and its forms, the purpose of each individual thread suddenly becomes clear, its place in the magnificent picture of existence. Or if the soul is a quiet melody played by a lone flute in a garden at night, then the state is a full orchestra, and understanding how the conductor unites the sounds of dozens of different instruments, how a powerful symphony is created, also reveals the secret to the harmony of that solitary flute. To grasp this analogy, Plato invites us to look inward into the quiet cosmos of the human soul. The soul, according to his teaching, is not something monolithic. It is like a wondrous chariot, drawn by two horses and guided by a charioteer. Each of these three parts has its own nature, its own aspirations, its own music. First, there is the charioteer. This is the rational part of the soul, the inner sage. He sits calmly, his gaze fixed on the distance, toward the stars of eternal truths. He does not strive for wealth or for fame. His only passion is for knowledge, for order, for harmony. He is the quiet voice of reason, attempting to guide the entire being toward the good. This is the light of consciousness, which unhurriedly contemplates the world, seeking meaning and balance in all things. His chariot is pulled by two very different horses. One of them is white, noble, and proud. This is the spirited or willful part of the soul. It is the source of courage, honor, ambition, the drive for victory, and self-respect. This horse, when it heeds the charioteer, becomes the embodiment of valor. It helps to overcome obstacles, to defend what is right, and to carry out the wise decisions of reason. It is the fire in the chest that warms us and gives us the strength to act. But if this fire is left unattended, it can transform into blind rage, into arrogance and destructive aggression. The second horse is dark, unruly, and powerful. It constantly pulls to the side, bowing its head toward the earth, seeking food, water, and earthly pleasures. This is the desiring, or appetitive, part. Within it live all the bodily desires and instincts, hunger, thirst, the longing for comfort, for wealth, for physical gratification. This part is not evil in itself. It is the source of life's energy. It compels us to care for the body, to continue our kind. But it is blind. It knows no measure. If this dark horse is allowed to steer the chariot, it will drag it into a mire of endless and insatiable desires. Justice in the soul, according to Plato, is precisely the perfect harmony of these three principles. It is when the charioteer of reason holds the reins firmly but fairly, when the white horse of will obeys his commands and helps to keep the dark horse in check, and the dark horse of desire receives its measure of nourishment and rest, but does not command the entire journey. This is an inner order, the quiet music of accord, when each part of the soul performs its natural function and does not encroach upon the others. Now, holding this image of the chariot in our minds, we can return to the great tapestry, the ideal state, and here an astonishing correspondence is revealed. The state, for Plato, is nothing other than the soul, written in large letters. It too is composed of three parts, three classes of society. In the place of the charioteer of reason stand the philosopher rulers of the state. This is a small group of the wisest people who have undergone a long path of education and have come to know the true nature of goodness and justice. Their goal is not power or wealth. Their sole aim is the well-being of the entire state. Like captains of a ship, they gaze at the eternal stars of the ideas to plot the right course through the stormy sea of life. They are the collective mind of the city. In the place of the white, noble horse, the state has its class of warriors or guardians. These are the people in whom the spirited element naturally dominates. They are courageous, strong, and loyal. Their task is to protect the state from external enemies and to maintain order within, carrying out the wise commands of the rulers. They are the embodiment of the state's honor and courage, its collective will. And finally, in the place of the dark, desiring horse, the state has its third and most numerous class, the artisans, farmers, and merchants. These are the people in whom the appetitive element prevails. They create all the material goods necessary for life. They grow food, build homes, and make clothes. They are the foundation of the state, its body, which ensures its physical existence. Justice in the state, just as in the soul, is the perfect harmony of these three parts. It is not about an equality where a warrior tries to rule or an artisan tries to fight. It is about order. Justice arrives when the rulers wisely govern, the warriors loyally protect, and the artisans diligently work. It is when each class, like each part of the soul, fulfills its own natural function without interfering in the business of the others. This is that grand symphony, that very music of the spheres, embodied in the life of the community. Thus, in this wondrous correspondence, the state becomes a mirror in which the soul can see itself in its true form. The imagined image of an ideal order becomes the standard against which one can tune one's own soul. This principle of harmonious unity is the very foundation of the imagined city. The next step is to walk along its streets, to become more closely acquainted with those who create this majestic symphony with its remarkable inhabitants. Once the general blueprint of the ideal city has been drawn, and its guiding principle, the correspondence between the state and the soul, has been established, the time comes to breathe life into this design. It is time to move from the drawing to the structure itself, from the musical score to the sounding of the instruments. Philosophical thought invites us on an imagined walk through the streets of this city to observe its inhabitants, the three classes from whose harmonious interaction justice is born. They are like three strings on a perfect lyre. Each has its own tone, its own thickness, and its own purpose, but only their shared chord can create music. The first string, the thickest and the lowest, which provides the foundational deep tone, is the class of the producers. To it belong the farmers who bend over the fertile earth, the artisans who transform clay, wood, and metal into useful things, and the merchants who ensure the exchange of these goods. This class corresponds to the desiring appetitive part of the soul. It is the foundation, the body of the state, its material basis. Its primary task is to provide for the physical existence and well-being of the entire society. Without their labor, without the bread they grow and the houses they build, the city could not survive for a single day. They are the roots of the great tree of state, reaching deep into the earth and drawing from it the saps of life. Their principal virtue, their key to harmony, is moderation. Although this class is the embodiment of society's desires, Its strivings must be ordered. Wealth and poverty, according to Plato, are two diseases that destroy a society. Excessive wealth gives rise to laziness, indulgence, and a love for disruptive innovations that shake stability. Extreme poverty, in turn, breeds resentment, envy, and degradation. Therefore, it is the task of the rulers to ensure that there are neither beggars nor the ostentatiously rich in this class. The producers may have private property and form families, for their activities are tied to the material world, but their moderation lies in the voluntary acceptance that they should be governed by the higher, wiser classes. They do not seek power or military glory. They find satisfaction and dignity in their work, understanding that their contribution is vital for the whole. Their desires are like a great river that flows between strong banks built by reason, nourishing all the land without turning into a destructive flood. The second string, tuned higher, sounds powerful and clear. This is the class of the warriors, or the guardian auxiliaries. They are the embodiment of the spirited, willful part of the soul. They are the heart and the muscles of the state. They are selected from childhood for their special aptitudes, strength of spirit, swiftness, keenness of perception, and most importantly, a noble fierceness toward enemies and a gentleness toward their fellow citizens. They are like well-bred dogs, who faithfully serve their master, ready to tear a wolf apart, yet are gentle with the shepherd's children. Their task is twofold: to protect the city from external threats, and to assist the rulers in maintaining law and order within. They are the living shield of the state. The main virtue of the warriors is courage, but this is not the blind bravery of a daredevil. Plato gives it a very precise definition. Courage is a lawful conviction about what should and should not be truly feared. Through a special education, the warriors internalize that what is to be feared is not death, pain, or hardship, but only shame, injustice, and the betrayal of their city's ideals. This conviction, as if dyed into them, sinks so deeply into their souls that no temptation or trial can wash it away. The life of these guardians is stern and ascetic. For them, private property is abolished. They possess no gold or silver, nor a home of their own. They live in common barracks, eat simple food at a common table, and receive from the citizens only what is necessary for their sustenance. This is done to eliminate any possibility of corruption. A warrior who owns nothing will not use his strength for personal enrichment, and will not be transformed from a protector into a predator. Moreover, Plato extends this principle of community to family life, proposing for them a community of spouses and children. This is done to destroy the feelings of mine and not mine, transforming the entire guardian class into a single unified family, where each sees in every other a brother, sister, father, or child. Their only family is the state. Their only wealth is honor. They are the strong branches of the tree of state, which bear the brunt of the wind and the storm. And finally, the third string, the finest and the highest, whose sound is barely perceptible, yet it is the one that sets the tone for the entire harmony. This is the class of the philosopher rulers. They are very few, the rarest and most precious fruit of the whole society. They are the embodiment of the rational part of the soul. They are the brain and the conscience of the state. They do not become rulers by birth or by wealth, but as the result of a long and difficult selection process. They are those from the guardian class who have shown the greatest love for wisdom, an irresistible pull toward knowing the truth, and the best aptitude for abstract thought. their virtue is wisdom. And again, this is not mere life experience or practical cleverness. It is the knowledge of the eternal, unchanging ideas, and above all, the idea of the good, which is the sun in the world of thought, the source of all truth and being. Only one who has seen this light, who understands the fundamental laws of the universe's harmony, can justly govern a state. Their life, like that of the warriors, is communal and devoid of material comforts. They own nothing beyond what is necessary, for their treasures are not of this earth. Paradoxically, the key trait of a true ruler, according to Plato, is their unwillingness to rule. A philosopher who has known the pleasure of contemplating pure truth finds the return to the world of political intrigue and human affairs to be a burdensome duty. He descends back into the cave of social life, not from a lust for power, but from compassion and a sense of obligation to the city that raised him. And it is precisely this absence of ambition that makes him the ideal ruler, for his decisions will be dictated not by personal gain, but exclusively by the pursuit of the common good. They are the very top of the tree of state, reaching for the sunlight of truth and transforming it into life-giving energy for every branch and every leaf. This is what justice looks like, written in large letters. It is a perfect order in which each class, like a musician in an orchestra, plays its part with its own inherent virtue. The producers provide the material foundation, guided by moderation. The warriors protect the integrity of the whole, filled with courage. The philosophers direct everything toward the good, armed with wisdom. When these three strings sound in unison, the grand and beautiful music of the just state is born. This is the very harmony that philosophical thought was dedicated to finding, a harmony that found its model in the structure of the cosmos itself, a harmonious city where each class performs its function is like a flawless musical instrument. But how can we ensure that this instrument is always perfectly tuned? How do we guarantee that the souls with gold will rule, the souls with silver will protect, and the souls with iron and bronze will labor? Plato's thought provides an answer through education. Education in the ideal state is not merely the transfer of knowledge. It is a grand and intricate process of sorting, polishing, and elevating human souls. It is the path to the light. At the heart of this process lies the so-called noble myth. From earliest childhood, citizens are told that they are all brothers and sisters, born from the same mother, the earth. But when the divine craftsman fashioned them, he mixed different metals into their souls. Into those who are fit to rule, he mixed gold into those who are to be their helpers. The warriors, he mixed silver, and into the farmers and artisans, he mixed iron and bronze. This myth does not create a rigid hereditary caste. On the contrary, its main emphasis is that a golden father may give birth to a silver son, and a bronze father to a golden one. Therefore, the first and most important duty of the rulers is to observe the children, to recognize the metal in their souls, and regardless of their origin, to transfer them to their appropriate class. Education becomes the very sieve that filters the new generation, allowing each soul to find its natural place. The education of the future guardians, both the warriors and the rulers, begins at birth and consists of two main parts: musical education for the soul and gymnastics for the body. The goal is not to create a crude athlete or an effete dreamer, but to achieve a perfect harmony between the spirited and the rational principles within the soul. Musical education, or the education of the muses, is far more than just music. It encompasses everything that shapes the soul, and it begins with the stories and myths told to children. Plato insists upon the strictest censorship. All myths of gods who quarrel, deceive, commit adultery, or show weakness must be forbidden. The gods in the ideal state may only be represented as sources of goodness, beauty, and truth. Likewise, heroes must be models of courage, self-control, and respect for their elders. Tales of the terrors of the underworld, which make one tremble at the thought of death, are removed. A guardian must not fear death. He must fear dishonor. Through such carefully selected stories, a correct moral tuning fork is set within the child's soul from its earliest years. It learns to love the beautiful and despise the ugly long before it can understand them with its reason.
Next comes music itself.
Melodies and rhythms have an immense influence on character. Therefore, all plaintive, relaxing, or ornate musical modes that breed softness and indulgence are removed from use. Only two remain: the Dorian mode, which imitates the sounds of courage and fortitude in battle, and the Phrygian, which reproduces the melodies of prudence and tranquility in peaceful work. Rhythms, too, must be simple and orderly, expressing a brave and harmonious life. Poetry, music, even architecture and crafts, everything must breathe beauty, simplicity, and order, imperceptibly forming in the young souls a love for harmony. Parallel to musical education is gymnastics. Its purpose is not simply to develop muscles, but to make the body a healthy, resilient, and obedient instrument of the soul. The training regimen is simple and strict, as is the diet. There are no exquisite dishes, sauces, or sweets that ignite the passions and breed disease. A simple diet and constant training make the body so robust that the citizens of the ideal state have almost no need for doctors. Gymnastics tempers not only the body, but also the spirit, developing the will. The key to success lies in balance. One who engages only in gymnastics becomes harsh and coarse, their soul turning deaf. One who is engrossed only in musical education becomes too soft, effete, and weak. Only the correct combination of these two disciplines gives birth to a harmonious personality, courageous, yet at the same time wise and sensitive to beauty. This first stage of education lasts until about the age of 20. Throughout this time, the youths, both boys and girls, for Plato insists on the same education for both sexes, are closely watched. They are subjected to various tests. They are made to overcome difficulties, tempted with pleasures, and frightened with dangers. The goal is to see which of them holds most firmly to the convictions instilled in childhood, who does not forget their duty to the state. The best, those who have passed all the trials, advance to the next, higher stage of education. The others become the warrior guardians. For the chosen ones, the path to true philosophy begins. It is a path of ascent from the world of visible things to the world of pure ideas. And the first step on this path is mathematics. For 10 years, from the age of 20 to 30, they study arithmetic, geometry, stereometry, the science of solids, astronomy, and harmonics, the theory of music. These sciences are important not for their practical application, not for better trade or construction. Their purpose is to accustom the mind to turn away from the changing world of the senses and to look upon the eternal, unchanging world of numbers, figures, and proportions. It is a training that forces the soul to turn its gaze from the shadows on the cave wall to the things themselves. At the age of 30, a new selection takes place. Those who have best mastered the mathematical sciences and have shown the greatest fortitude of spirit are admitted to the highest science, dialectic. This is the pinnacle of knowledge. Dialectic is the art of philosophical conversation, the ability to ask questions and give answers, moving from idea to idea without any reliance on sensory experience. It casts aside the assumptions upon which mathematics is based and proceeds to the very beginning of everything, to the idea of the good. To know the good is equivalent to emerging from the dark cave and seeing the sun, just as the sun makes the world of things visible and gives them life, so the good makes the world of ideas knowable and gives them being. The study of dialectic lasts for 5 years. But even after this, the philosopher is not ready to rule. Having acquired the highest knowledge at the age of 35, he must return to the cave. For the next 15 years, he is obliged to hold various state and military posts, to lead and to take on responsibility. This is necessary to gain life experience, to learn to apply his knowledge in practice, and not to be inferior to those who have only practical experience. This is the last and most difficult trial. Only at the age of 50, having traveled this long and arduous path, from childhood tales to mathematical abstractions, from dialectical debates to 15 years of state service, is a person deemed ready to become a philosopher ruler. She has known the truth and has proven her loyalty to it in action. Now her duty is to take turns with other such philosophers at the helm of power, guiding the life of the state in the light of the absolute truth she has contemplated. Thus, through decades of tireless work and rigorous selection, is created the one who alone has the right and the ability to rule, the wise one. The long path of our thoughts, which began with the simple question, "What is justice?" has led us to the creation of an entire city within our imagination. We built its foundation on the principle of the analogy between the soul and the state, populated it with 3 classes of citizens, and designed for them a complex system of education that leads the chosen few toward the light of truth. And now, standing at the summit of this intellectual construction, we can cast our gaze over the entire city and finally see the answer. It is not in a single building, nor in a particular law. The answer is the very architecture of the city, its living, breathing order. Justice in the state, written in large, shining letters, is the principle that each one does their own work. This statement, seemingly simple at first glance, contains within it the entire depth of Platonic harmony. It means that the class of philosophers, endowed with wisdom, rules. The class of warriors, filled with courage, protects, and the class of artisans, guided by moderation, works and provides for material needs. Justice is when the shoemaker makes shoes and does not try to command the army, when the warrior stands guard and does not seek to accumulate wealth, and when the philosopher contemplates ideas and does not look for personal gain from power. It is like a perfect, living organism. The brain, as the ruler, sees the whole picture and gives commands. The heart and muscles, as the warriors, set the body in motion and protect it, and the other organs, like the artisans, work tirelessly, digesting food and sustaining life. The health of the organism depends on whether each part fulfills its natural function. Sickness begins when the stomach tries to think or the heart tries to digest food. It is the same in the state. Any mixing of functions, any interference by one class in the affairs of another, is the beginning of disorder, of sickness, of injustice. This is not a system of oppression, but a system of self-realization. Each citizen, by occupying the place determined by their natural gifts, achieves the best version of themselves and makes the greatest contribution to the common good. At the foundation of such a state lies not the force of coercion, but a deep inner agreement among all citizens that such an order is the best and most correct one. This is that great visible justice. And now, holding this majestic image before our eyes, let us return to where it all began, to the soul of an individual person, where justice is written in small letters. The principle remains unchanged. Each one does their own work. The three parts of the soul, the rational, the spirited, and the appetitive, must live in the same harmony as the three classes in the state. Justice in the soul arrives when its rational part, that inner philosopher who yearns for truth, rules with wisdom. When the spirited part, the inner warrior filled with noble spirit, becomes its faithful ally, providing the willpower to carry out right decisions and the courage to resist temptations. And when the appetitive part, that noisy crowd of inner desires, submits to the guidance of reason, receiving its measure of satisfaction, but not seizing power over the entire soul. A just person is one who has established a perfect order within their inner world. They do not simply act justly. Their actions are the natural consequence of their inner state. Such a person will not steal, will not deceive, will not betray, and not because they fear punishment or condemnation. They will not do these things because such an act would be a hideous dissonance in the beautiful music of their soul, an act of inner self-destruction. They are the master of themselves. To better understand the light, one must look upon the darkness. The opposite of justice is injustice, and it too is a state, not a single act. Injustice is a rebellion, a discord, a civil war within the soul. It is when the appetitive part enslaves the rational part, forcing it to serve its own base ends. It is when the spirited part, filled with blind rage, begins to act without the guidance of wisdom. It is when the roles are confused, when the servants become the masters. Here Plato turns to his most powerful metaphor, that of health and disease. Justice is the health, beauty, and well-being of the soul. It is its natural, harmonious state, and injustice is a disease, an ugliness and a weakness of the soul. It is a disorder that corrodes it from within. Philosophy poses the crucial question: would a person agree to live with a body that is rotting from a terrible disease, even if offered all the riches of the world, absolute power, and the freedom to do whatever they please? The answer is obvious. Then why would a person think that they could live well with a sick, ugly, tormented soul, no matter what external successes they might achieve? Thus, justice is a good in itself, independent of any external consequences. The life of a just person, even if they are misunderstood, persecuted, and condemned, is infinitely better than the life of an unjust person who prospers and enjoys great esteem. For the first lives with a healthy and beautiful soul, while the second lives with a soul in a state of constant inner decay. This ideal state of the soul, where reason reigns, is the one and only aristocratic, from Aristos, the best constitution. All other constitutions of the soul are its distortions, its diseases that lead to unhappiness. There is the timocratic soul, where the spirited element rules, and the highest value is honor and military glory. There is the oligarchic soul, where power has been seized by the frugal part of the appetitive element, and the main goal becomes the accumulation of wealth. There is the democratic soul, where all desires, both good and bad, are considered equal, and life turns into a chaotic chase after fleeting pleasures. And finally, there is the tyrannical soul, the deepest stage of the disease, where one, lowest and most terrible passion becomes an absolute tyrant, enslaving all other parts of the soul and turning a person's life into a hell of fear and insatiable craving. But in the ideal state and in the ideal soul, only one order reigns, the order of reason, the order of justice. And so, the answer has been found. Justice is not an external rule, but an internal harmony. It is the art of governing oneself, of creating within oneself a perfect order where each part knows its place and fulfills its role. It is not something one can have or not have. It is something one can be. It is the health of the soul, its strength, its beauty, and the search for this inner harmony is the most essential and the noblest task of all human life. The perfect state created in our imagination, where justice reigns, illuminated by the light of wisdom, stands as the highest peak of human society. Yet in a world of changing things, in a world of births and deaths, nothing is eternal. Even the most perfect order carries within it the seed of its own decay, and philosophical thought, having constructed this ideal, now traces with no less diligence the sorrowful path of its ruin, the gradual descent from harmony to chaos, from health to the gravest illness. This journey downward into the darkness is no less instructive than the ascent to the light. It all begins with a barely perceptible error, with the first dissonance in the majestic symphony. The philosopher rulers, for all their wisdom, are still human. At some point, they may err in the complex calculations for the best time to bring forth a new generation of guardians. And so children are born into the world in whose souls silver and iron begin to outweigh the gold. This new generation, though raised according to the old laws, already carries within it a hidden passion for things that glitter, for things that can be held in the hand. Reason still rules, but its voice grows quieter, while the whisper of ambition and the thirst for gain grows louder. The ideal aristocracy, the rule of the best, takes its first step toward decline. Thus is born a timocracy, the rule of honor, the spirited, willful element, which in the ideal state was the faithful helper of reason, now seizes power. The highest value is no longer wisdom, but military glory, respect, reputation. The state transforms into a military camp, constantly preparing for or waging war, for war is the main source of honors. The philosophers, with their talk of eternal ideas, now seem like impractical dreamers. Instead, ambitious, energetic generals rise to the top. A secret accumulation of wealth begins, for the warriors, having tasted the fruits of victory, also desire material reward. Communal property is gradually eroded. Land and houses pass into private hands. The person who corresponds to this order is the timocratic man. He is usually the son of a noble but unambitious philosopher father from the ideal state. From childhood, he hears his mother complain of her husband's lack of worldly success, of how he does not strive for power or acquire wealth. He sees how his wise father disdains all that is valued in their society, torn between respect for his father and a longing for recognition, he chooses a middle path. He gives power over his soul to the spirited element, the pursuit of honor. He is proud, loves competition and sport, is stern with his subordinates but obedient to authority. He uses reason only for military stratagems, and he regards wealth with a secret greed. But hidden greed cannot remain so forever. The accumulation of wealth becomes ever more open, and the state takes the next step downward, transforming into an oligarchy, the rule of the wealthy few. Now, to have power, one needs not a noble spirit, but money. A property qualification is established. Whoever does not have a certain level of wealth cannot hold public office. Society splits into two hostile parts: a handful of exceedingly rich rulers and a vast mass of the poor. They live in the same city, but they constantly fear one another and weave intrigues. The state loses its unity. It is no longer able to wage war because the oligarchs are afraid to arm the people who hate them. The highest value becomes profit. The oligarchic man is the son of the timocrat. He watches as his father, caught up in war and intrigue, loses his fortune and dies in poverty. This lesson is forever etched upon his soul. He banishes ambition from it and enthrones thriftiness and greed. His entire being is subordinated to a single goal: to make money. He is hardworking and miserly, satisfying only the most necessary needs, while forcefully suppressing all other desires that require spending. His soul is divided. On the one hand, he appears respectable and honest because he understands that a good reputation helps in business. But inside him, suppressed but alive, swarm base, criminal desires, which he unleashes only when he can do so without risk to his purse. Power in his soul belongs to the appetitive element, but only to that part of it which strives for what is necessary for survival and accumulation. In such a state, the chasm between the rich and poor widens until an explosion occurs. The poor, seeing the weakness and effeminacy of the oligarchs, rise up in revolt and are victorious. On the ruins of oligarchy, they build a democracy. Freedom and equality are proclaimed as the main principles. All offices are distributed by lot. There is no compulsion. If you don't want to rule, you don't have to. If you don't want to fight when everyone else is fighting, that is your business. Absolute tolerance for any way of life prevails. The city turns into a bright, noisy marketplace where anyone can choose any constitution for themselves and live as they please. This, at first glance, is the most attractive and freest of all regimes. The democratic man is the son of the oligarch. He grows up in an atmosphere of strict economy where all unnecessary desires were suppressed. But falling in with a company of young hedonists, he tastes the forbidden fruits. A war begins in his soul between the old thrifty habits and the new profligate passions. The new ones often win. His life becomes the embodiment of equality. He gives no preference to any desire. Today he drinks wine and listens to the flute. Tomorrow he drinks only water and exhausts himself with diets. Today he engages in sports. Tomorrow he is idle, and the day after he pretends to be a philosopher. His life has neither order nor purpose. Power in his soul belongs to all desires at once, both good and bad, which rule him in turn in complete anarchy. But excessive freedom, by an inexorable law, transforms into its opposite, into the deepest slavery. In a democratic society suffering from anarchy, the people begin to look for a protector, a charismatic leader who promises to restore order. This protector relying on the support of the poorest classes, first deals with the rich and then with anyone who has an independent opinion. He surrounds himself with a guard of mercenaries and former slaves and provokes wars so that the people will need him as their leader. Gradually, he destroys all remnants of freedom and becomes a tyrant, and the state is transformed into a place of total fear and servitude. This is the lowest point of the fall. The tyrannical man is the most wretched and diseased of all creatures. He is usually the son of a democratic man, accustomed from childhood to complete permissiveness. In his soul, with the help of evil counselors, a single but immensely powerful and lawless desire takes root. This passion, like a great winged drone, seizes the citadel of his soul, driving out shame, reason, and moderation. It becomes his absolute master. To satisfy its insatiable appetite, he is ready to do anything, to steal, to deceive, to kill. He becomes a slave to his own worst part. His soul is a hell, filled with fears, suspicions, pangs of conscience, and desires that can never be satisfied. He wanted to be completely free, and he became a complete slave. Thus ends the sorrowful journey downward, from the bright, rational aristocracy, through the ambitious democracy, the greedy oligarchy, and the anarchic democracy. Society and the soul descend into the black abyss of tyranny. This path of decay demonstrates how fragile harmony is, and how relentless is the logic of disintegration once the first step away from reason has been taken. Each successive regime is born as a reaction to the flaws of the previous one, but it only deepens the disease, leading to an even worse state. When the arguments of reason have been exhausted, when logical proofs have reached their limit, philosophical thought turns to its final, most mysterious device, the myth. We have traveled the path from the construction of an ideal city to its complete downfall. We have seen that justice is the health and harmony of the soul, while injustice is its gravest illness. It has been shown that a just person is happier than an unjust one, even if they must endure suffering. It would seem the conversation is complete, but as a final offering, Plato presents not a proof, but a probable tale, a story meant to strengthen in us a love for justice, and to reveal its cosmic significance. This is the account of what awaits the soul after death, the myth of a warrior named. There was a brave soldier from Pamphylia who had fallen in battle. When the bodies of the dead were collected from the field 10 days later, his was found unspoiled, as if he were only sleeping. He was brought home, and on the 12th day, as the funeral pyre was being prepared, ere awoke and told of what he had seen in the world beyond. He recounted that his soul, upon leaving his body, had set out on a journey with many other souls. They came to a wondrous divine place, where there were 2 chasms in the earth leading down, and in the heavens above 2 openings leading up. Between them sat the judges. They commanded the just souls to go to the right and upward into the heavens, first attaching to their chests the signs of their righteous deeds. The unjust were ordered to go to the left and downward into the earth, with tablets on their backs listing all their transgressions, or watched as pure shining souls descended from one heavenly opening, while from the earthly chasm others arose covered in dust and grime. They gathered on a great meadow as if for a festival. Those who came from the heavens spoke of incredible bliss and visions of unspeakable beauty they had beheld for 1,000 years. And those who rose from beneath the earth with weeping and wailing recalled their sufferings for they had been punished tenfold for every wicked deed. For 1,000 years this journey lasted, of reward or of punishment, before the souls were gathered together once more. After spending 7 days in the meadow, the souls traveled onward, and after a 4-day journey, they saw a marvelous vision that pierced the entire universe. It was a light, straight as a column, more brilliant than any rainbow, stretching from the heavens to the earth. This was the axis of the world, the spindle of Ananke, goddess of inevitability, upon which all the celestial spheres revolved. Its shaft was made of the hardest adamant, and on it were strung 8 concentric whorls, fitting closely one inside the other. Each whorl, or sphere, had its own color, its own speed of rotation, and represented the orbit of the stars and planets. On the rim of each circle sat a siren, singing a single note, and from these 8 notes was formed a single, perfect chord, the harmony of the spheres, the music of the cosmos. Around the spindle, at equal distances, sat the 3 daughters of inevitability on thrones, clothed in white, the Moirai, the goddesses of fate. Lachesis, the allotter, sang of the past. Clotho, the spinner of the thread of life, sang of the present. And Atropos, the inevitable, sang of the future. And here arrived the most vital, most dramatic moment of the entire journey. A divine messenger took from the lap of Lachesis lots in the form of numbers and samples of lives. There were far more samples of lives than there were souls, and they were of every possible kind. There were lives of humans and of animals, of men and of women, lives filled with wealth and with poverty, with fame and with obscurity, with health and with sickness. There were the lives of tyrants, the lives of ordinary citizens, the lives of artists, and the lives of craftsmen. The messenger proclaimed these solemn words, the word of the maiden Lachesis, daughter of inevitability. Souls of a day, here begins another cycle of mortal life that leads to death. Your guardian spirit will not be chosen for you, but you shall choose your own guardian spirit. Let him who draws the first lot be the first to choose a life to which he shall be bound by necessity. But virtue has no master, and as a man honors or dishonors her, he will have more of her or less. The responsibility lies with the one who chooses. God is not to blame. This moment of choice is the pinnacle of freedom and responsibility. A person's fate is not predetermined. The soul itself, based on its previous experience, chooses its future path. And watched as this drama of choice unfolded. The one who drew the first lot, a soul who had come from the heavens and had lived righteously in his past life, only through habit, not through philosophical understanding, rushed without thinking to the most magnificent life of a tyrant. In his haste, he did not see that this life fated him, among other miseries, to devour his own children. When he realized this, he began to beat his breast and curse his fate, having forgotten the messenger's words, that he should blame not God, but himself. This was a terrible warning. Simple, unexamined virtue is unreliable. Other souls chose differently. Saw a soul that had once been Orpheus. Out of a hatred for women, by whom he had been torn apart, it chose the life of a swan. The soul of Agamemnon, who also hated humanity for its injustice, chose the destiny of an eagle. The soul of Odysseus, weary of endless wanderings and ambitious schemes, searched for a long time for its fate. It found the life of an ordinary, unknown private citizen, which all the others had disdainfully cast aside, and took it with joy. Many animals chose the lives of humans, and humans the lives of animals. When all the souls had made their choice, they approached Lachesis one by one, and she gave to each the guardian spirit it had chosen. That spirit led the soul to Clotho, who with her hand touched the spindle and ratified the chosen destiny, and then to Atropos, who made the spun thread irreversible. After this, each soul had to pass under the throne of inevitability herself. At the end of their path, they came to the plain of Lethe, or forgetfulness, where no plant grew. There they camped by the river Amalus, the river of unconcern, whose water no vessel could hold. Each soul had to drink a certain measure of this water, but those who lacked wisdom drank more than was due, and everyone who drank forgot everything in the world. As they fell asleep, at midnight there was a clap of thunder and an earthquake, and the souls, like shooting stars, were carried away in different directions to their new birth. However, was forbidden to drink the water. He did not know how he returned to his body, only that he awoke and found himself lying on the funeral pyre, having preserved the memory of all he had seen. This story, as Plato says, was saved, and it can save us if we believe it. It teaches that our soul is immortal, and that we bear full responsibility for our life and for the choice we make after it. The main task of a person is to strive for the knowledge that will allow them, in that crucial moment, to distinguish a good life from a bad one, and to make a wise choice. One must practice justice all one's life, combining it with reason. Then, says the philosopher, we will be friends to ourselves and to the gods, both here on earth and on that 1,000-year journey, and we will receive our reward, and our path will not be subterranean and arduous, but smooth and celestial. We have followed the journey of the soul to the stars and back, witnessing in the great myth of a cosmic panorama of justice and choice. But the philosophical thought of Plato leaves us with one more image, perhaps the most powerful and famous of all, which explains the very nature of our knowledge and our ignorance. After the discussion of the ideal rulers who contemplate the light of truth and of their difficult education, a question arises: what is this path from darkness to light? What does the awakening of the human soul look like? To explain this, Plato tells not just a myth, but an extended allegory, a picture meant to be forever etched upon the mind, the allegory of the cave. Imagine a deep subterranean cave, like a dwelling. In it, from childhood, live people who are chained by their legs and necks in such a way that they cannot move or turn their heads. They are forced to look only straight ahead at the far wall of the cave. Behind them, much higher up, a fire is burning, illuminating the space, and between the fire and the prisoners runs a path enclosed by a low wall, similar to the screen behind which puppeteers present their shows. Behind this wall, other people carry all sorts of objects that rise above it: statues of people, figures of animals made of stone and wood. Some of these puppeteers are talking, others are silent. The prisoners below have never seen these people, nor the real objects. All they see throughout their entire lives are the shadows that these objects cast upon the cave wall, and the sounds that drift from behind the screen they attribute to the moving shadows. For these prisoners, the only reality is the world of shadows. This is their entire experience. They give the shadows names, they study their sequence, they hold competitions to see who can guess most quickly which shadow will appear next. The one who is most skilled at this receives honor and respect from the others. Their science, their wisdom, their culture, all are built upon this two-dimensional flickering world. They do not know that real three-dimensional things exist, and that their world is but a pale copy, an illusion. This is a picture of humanity, living in a world of sensory impressions, opinions, and conventional beliefs, with no suspicion of a higher reality. Now imagine that one of the prisoners is freed from his chains and forced to stand up and turn his head. This would be exquisitely painful. The bright light of the fire, which he has never seen, would blind him. When he is shown the real objects whose shadows he once saw, he will not recognize them. He will be convinced that the shadows to which he is accustomed are far more real and true than these dazzling, incomprehensible things. If he were forced to look at the fire itself, his eyes would ache, and he would try to turn away and back to the familiar and intelligible world of shadows. But his trials do not end here. He is forcibly dragged upwards, up a steep and rocky slope, out of the cave. This path upward symbolizes the arduous process of philosophical education. It is painful, filled with resistance, for the soul does not want to leave its familiar world of illusions, and so at last he is pulled out into the light of day. Here he is overcome by an even greater pain and blindness. The radiance of the sun is so unbearable that he can see absolutely nothing of what we call reality. He needs time to adjust. At first, he will only be able to look at the shadows of real objects on the ground, then at their reflections in the water. This is the first step toward knowledge, understanding that even in the real world, there are images and their originals. In time, he will be able to look at the things themselves, but at first it will be easier for him to do so at night, contemplating the starry sky and the moon. This symbolizes the study of the mathematical sciences, which are an intermediate link between the sensory world and the world of pure ideas. They allow one to look at eternal, unchanging objects, but not yet at the source of truth itself, and only with time, as his eyes grow stronger, will he be able to look at the sun itself. At first he will look at its reflection, and then he will dare to gaze upon it directly, in its proper place, and then he will understand that it is the sun that brings the seasons and the course of the years, that it is the cause of everything in the visible world, and that even the objects whose shadows he saw in the cave exist because of its light. The sun in this allegory is the idea of the good, the highest idea in Plato's philosophy, the source of all being and all knowledge. Only by grasping it does the philosopher attain true knowledge. Remembering his former life in the cave, the wisdom and the honors bestowed there, he will feel a deep pity for his companions in misfortune, and will understand that all their knowledge is worthless. He would rather be the lowliest servant in the world of light than a king in the realm of shadows, and so, filled with compassion, he decides to return to the cave to tell the others about the real world and to set them free. But here, a new trial awaits him. His eyes, now accustomed to the sunlight, can see nothing in the darkness of the cave. He seems ridiculous and clumsy to the prisoners. When he tries to make out the shadows, he fails, and they laugh at him, saying that his journey upward only ruined his sight, and that there is no point in even trying to go there. When he begins to tell them that their world is merely an illusion, and that true reality lies above, they consider him mad, and if he were to try to free one of them and drag them upward, they would, if only they could reach him, seize him and kill him. This is a transparent allusion to the fate of Socrates, whom the Athenians condemned to death for trying to lead them out of their state of ignorance. This allegory reveals the entire essence of Platonic philosophy. The cave is our everyday sensory world, The chains are our habits, prejudices, and the limits of our perception. The shadows are the opinions, views, and ideas that we receive from society and accept as truth. The puppeteers are the politicians, sophists, and artists who shape public opinion. The ascent upward is the painful process of the soul's education, its turning from the changing to the eternal. The world above is the world of true reality, the world of eternal and unchanging ideas, and the sun is the highest idea of the good. The philosopher's return to the cave is his moral duty to serve society, to rule and to enlighten, despite misunderstanding and mortal danger. The story of the cave is not just an ancient tale, it is an eternal model of the human journey to knowledge. It shows how deeply we can be immersed in illusions that we take for reality, and how difficult and painful it can be to question them. It is a story of the loneliness and courage of the thinker, of the chasm between knowledge and opinion, and of the tragic fate of one who, having seen the light, tries to share it with those who prefer to remain in the cozy darkness. The allegory of the cave has left us with a powerful image, an image of two worlds, one dark and one light, a world of illusions and a world of truth. We have followed the prisoner who was forcibly dragged upward, and who, after passing through pain and blindness, was at last able to see the sun. But what is this world that was revealed to his eyes? What is this reality that is so much more real than the one we are accustomed to, that it makes our entire daily life seem like a dream in an underground cavern? To answer this, philosophical thought takes its final, deepest step, inviting us to peer into the very foundation of Platonic metaphysics, into the world of eternal ideas or forms. The doctrine of the ideas is the core, the philosophical nucleus that explains everything else. The nature of justice, the necessity of philosopher kings, the purpose of education. It asserts that there are two levels of reality. The first is the visible world, the world of things which we perceive with our five senses. This is the world in which we live, the world of the cave. Its main characteristic is its changeability. Everything in it is born and dies, arises and vanishes, changes and decays. A flower that is beautiful today will wither tomorrow. A body that is strong today will in time grow old. Any object, any living creature in this world is imperfect, temporary, and fleeting. But there is another world, a higher one, accessible only to the mind. This is the world of ideas, or forms. This is the reality that lies beyond the cave. Unlike the visible world, this world is eternal, unchanging, and perfect. It is the realm of true reality, and our physical world is but its faint reflection, its shadow. To understand what an idea is in the Platonic sense, we must cast aside our usual notion of an idea as something that exists only in our heads. For Plato, an idea is not a product of human thought. On the contrary, it is an objective, independent reality, far more real than any physical object. Let us consider a simple example. Imagine all the chairs that exist in the world. They come in different shapes, sizes, and colors, made from different materials. All of them are imperfect. All will eventually break and disappear. But why, when looking at all these different objects, do we call them by the single word chair? It is because, according to Plato, apart from all these specific imperfect chairs, there exists the one, single, eternal, perfect, and unchanging idea of the chair, or chairness itself. This idea is the perfect blueprint after which all physical chairs are made. A craftsman, when creating a chair, is as if looking with his inner eye upon this perfect idea and trying to embody it in the material. Therefore, all physical chairs are merely copies, imperfect reflections of the one true reality, the idea of the chair. This applies not only to objects. We see many beautiful things in the world: a sunset, a work of art, a human face. All of them are fleeting manifestations of beauty. But what makes them beautiful? It is the fact that they participate, as Plato says, in the one eternal idea of beauty. It is as if they have absorbed a particle, a glimmer of this perfect beauty, which is itself invisible, but accessible to the mind. The same is true for concepts like justice, courage, and goodness. In the world, we see individual, just or unjust acts. But in order to evaluate them, we must have a notion of what justice itself is. This notion is a memory our soul has of the perfect idea of justice, which exists eternally in the world of forms. Thus, the world of ideas is a world of perfect blueprints, of essences that lie at the foundation of all that exists. And this world has its own clear hierarchy, its own structure. On the lower rungs are the ideas of physical objects and living things. Higher up are the ideas of mathematical concepts, such as equality, the triangle, and number. Higher still are the ideas of supreme values: justice, beauty, truth. But at the very summit of this pyramid, above all other ideas, stands one, the highest and most important, the idea of the good. This is the sun, from the allegory of the cave. The idea of the good is so fundamental and all-encompassing that it is difficult to describe in words. It is the cause of the being and the knowability of everything else. Just as the sun in the visible world provides the light without which we could see nothing, and at the same time provides the warmth and energy without which nothing could grow and live, so too the idea of the good in the world of ideas performs two functions. Firstly, it is the source of all truth. It illuminates the other ideas, making them accessible to be known by the human mind. We can understand what justice or beauty is only in the light of the good. Secondly, it is the source of being itself. It endows all other ideas with their reality and perfection. The idea of the good stands even on the other side of being higher than any essence, just as a cause is higher than its effect. The knowledge of this supreme idea is the ultimate goal of philosophy and the highest point the human soul can reach. The connection between these two worlds, the world of ideas and the world of things, is explained through the concepts of participation and recollection and amnesis. Everything in our world exists only because it participates in its corresponding idea, and our knowledge of the world is possible only because our immortal soul, before it was embodied in the body, dwelled in the world of ideas and contemplated them. Therefore, any process of learning is actually a process of remembering what the soul once already knew. When we see an imperfect circle, our soul recalls the perfect idea of the circle. When we reflect on justice, we are trying to recall the idea of justice. The education of a philosopher, therefore, is not the filling of an empty vessel with knowledge, but the art of turning the soul around. It is a process that helps the soul to turn away from the world of changing shadows and to remember its true homeland, the world of eternal ideas. This doctrine gives a final, profound meaning to everything we have spoken of before. The ideal state is just because its structure is the best possible embodiment, a copy of the eternal idea of justice. The philosopher must rule because he is the only one who has seen the idea of the good and can be guided by it, not by his own personal opinions. Justice in the soul is a good in itself because it brings the soul into alignment with the harmonious order that reigns in the world of true reality. The realization of this duality of the world brings a state of deep tranquility. All the hustle and bustle, all the passions, all the tragedies and successes of our physical world appear in a new light, as a theater of shadows. This does not mean that our life has no meaning. On the contrary, it acquires the highest meaning as an arena in which the soul can make its turn toward the eternal, as an opportunity to recall the perfect originals by contemplating the imperfect copies. Beyond the noisy world of change lies a quiet, motionless, radiant realm of perfection, which is the true home for our reason. We have wandered through the world of eternal ideas, illuminated by the light of the good, and have come to understand that the ideal state is but an attempt to embody this perfect order in the changing world of mortals. We have seen how meticulously the system of education is constructed, aiming to create philosopher rulers and courageous warriors. But philosophical thought is relentless in its logic. It poses a simple and formidable question: what will prevent these guardians, who have concentrated all power and military might in their hands, from turning from shepherds into wolves? What will stop them from using their power for their own enrichment and enslaving the very people they have sworn to protect? Plato's answer to this question is one of the most radical and startling ideas in the history of political thought. He proposes not merely external laws or controls, but a complete reconstruction of the very way of life for the two highest classes, the warriors and the philosophers. He proposes to perform a surgical operation on their social body to remove the very organs that give rise to the diseases of corruption, envy, and discord. And these organs are private property and the private family. Let us immerse ourselves in the strange, ascetic atmosphere of the guardian's life. The first thing that strikes you is the complete absence of personal property. Not one of them is permitted to own anything beyond the most necessary personal items. They have no private homes where they could seek solitude and accumulate treasures. They live together in common dwellings, similar to military camps, and they eat at a common table, like soldiers on a campaign. Their food is simple, and they receive it from the third class, the artisans, in the form of an annual provision, just enough to live on, with no surplus whatsoever. The strictest prohibition is placed on gold and silver. The guardians are not permitted to own them, nor even to touch them or be under the same roof with them. For, as the myth explains, they already have divine gold and silver in their souls, and they should not defile it with the admixture of perishable earthly metal, which has been the cause of countless crimes. Their only wealth is honor and service to the state. Why such severe restrictions? Plato explains this with relentless clarity. Firstly, it is the most reliable defense against corruption. If a person can own nothing, they cannot be bribed. If a ruler cannot accumulate wealth, they will never use their power for personal enrichment. Their interests automatically become identical to the interests of the entire state, for they have nothing of their own apart from the common good. Secondly, it is the path to absolute unity. Private property inevitably gives rise to the division of mine and yours. It is the source of disputes, lawsuits, envy, the arrogance of the rich, and the humiliation of the poor. By abolishing it, Plato transforms the entire guardian class into a single monolithic organism. They have no private interests to fight for. There is only one common interest, the well-being of the city. This frees them from petty cares and allows them to focus entirely on their high calling for the philosophers to contemplate truth and rule wisely, for the warriors to perfect their military art and defend the state. But Plato goes even further. He understands that an even deeper source of private interests, of egoism and nepotism, is the private family. The love for one's own children and spouse can compel a person to act against the interests of society, striving to secure a better fate for their loved ones. Therefore, he proposes a second, even more shocking step, the abolition of the traditional family for the guardians. In this strange world, there is no marriage in the sense we understand it. Men and women, who, by the way, receive an absolutely identical education and can perform the same duties, do not form permanent pairs. Procreation is regulated by the state. The rulers organize special nuptial festivals where couples come together by a drawing of lots. This lottery, however, is rigged in such a way as to pair the best men with the best women, ensuring the birth of the healthiest and most gifted offspring. The children born from these unions are taken from their parents immediately after birth and are handed over to special state educators who care for them in common nurseries. Mothers nurse the infants, but in such a way that no woman knows for sure which child is hers. Thus, no father knows his biological son or daughter, and no child knows their biological parents. The goal of this radical idea is to expand family feeling to the scale of the entire class. Every child is to regard all men of a certain age as their fathers, and all women as their mothers. In turn, all adult guardians consider all the children to be their common sons and daughters, and all peers are brothers and sisters to one another. In this way, the entire class of guardians is transformed into one great family. The feelings of mine and thine disappear not only in relation to things, but also in relation to people. This engenders an unprecedented unity. If one feels pain, all feel pain. If one rejoices, all rejoice. The state becomes like a single living organism. As Socrates said in the dialogue, if a person's finger hurts, the entire consciousness, the entire body, feels this pain as its own. It is the same in the ideal state. The joy or sorrow of one guardian citizen becomes the joy or sorrow of the whole city. There is no room for nepotism or favoritism, for a ruler cannot promote his own son, because he simply does not know who he is. The only criterion is personal valor and talent, revealed through the process of education. Such a way of life may seem horrifying, devoid of warmth and human feeling. Plato himself was aware of how wild his proposals sounded to the Athenian ear, but his goal was not to describe a pleasant life, but to construct a perfectly just one. He sought to show the high price that must be paid for an ideal. The life of the guardians is one of eternal service. They sacrifice personal happiness in the conventional sense, family comfort, wealth for a higher happiness, to live in a perfect society and to be its steadfast protectors. Their joy lies in fulfilling their purpose, in the awareness that they are part of a grand and harmonious whole. They are the embodiment of the idea that the common good is incomparably higher than the private. Thus, this austere system is the logical conclusion of the entire construction. It is the practical mechanism, the fortress wall that protects the ideal order from the erosion of human passions. It makes the rulers truly golden and the warriors silver, not allowing the rust of self-interest to corrode their souls. This is the final proof that Plato's ideal state is not a utopia of carefree living, but a stern and majestic project that demands from its finest members complete self-sacrifice in the name of harmony and justice. Our long journey is coming to an end. We have walked the paths of thought that lead from the bustling streets of Athens to the quiet world of eternal ideas. We have built a perfect city in our imagination, brick by brick, observing the birth of its harmony. We have seen its inhabitants, listened to the music of its education, and grasped its understanding of justice. Then, with sorrow, we followed the inexorable path of its decline, descending the steps of decay to the darkest abyss of tyranny. We peered beyond the veil of life in the myth of air and returned to the allegorical darkness of the cave, only to make the ascent to the light once more. Now that all the pieces of this vast mosaic are assembled, one final question remains. What is it that we now hold in our hands? What is Plato's Republic to us, its distant descendants, who hear the echo of his words across millennia? The first and most obvious answer might provoke anxiety and resistance. If we look upon this city as a practical political project, as a blueprint for actual construction, it can seem cold, inhuman, and even terrifying. Before the inner eye arises a society of total control, where art is subjected to the strictest censorship, where citizens are told a noble lie for their own good, where personal life is sacrificed to the state mechanism. The idea of abolishing the family and private property for the guardians, though justified by the pursuit of unity, is striking in its radicalism, which borders on cruelty. From the perspective of modern values, individual freedom, democratic choice, the right to privacy, the Platonic ideal can look like the blueprint for a perfect prison, where a person is but a cog in a soulless machine. Many critics have seen in the Republic a prototype of the totalitarian regimes of the future, a warning of the danger that lies in the quest for absolute perfection on earth. But such a view, though justified in its fears, perhaps misses the main point. It is trying to use a map of the starry sky as a plan for urban development. It demands from a poem the precision of an engineering calculation. There is another deeper way to understand the legacy of Plato's dream. Perhaps the Republic is not a blueprint for building a society, but a perfect mirror for contemplating the soul. Plato himself, in all likelihood, understood the impossibility of a literal implementation of his project. This is not an instruction manual, but a grand thought experiment. The philosopher asks the question, what if we wanted to create a perfectly just society? What are the deepest sources of injustice we would have to eliminate? And his analysis shows that these sources lie in two fundamental human institutions: the desire for personal enrichment, private property, and the desire for the well-being of one's closest relations, the private family. His radical proposals are not a call to action, but a diagnosis. He shows what an incredibly high price would have to be paid for the ideal, and in doing so, he forces us to think about the nature of our own societies and the compromises upon which they are built. The best metaphor for understanding the Republic is a starry compass. No mariner in their right mind tries to sail to the North Star. It is impossible and senseless, but every wise captain in the dark, boundless sea uses its unchanging position in the sky to determine their course, to keep from getting lost. Plato's ideal state is this very star in the firmament of human thought. It is unattainable. It may not even be desirable in its literal form, but it gives us an absolute point of reference, a fixed point against which we can measure our own imperfect attempts. Looking at it, we can ask ourselves, is our society moving toward greater harmony or toward greater discord? Does our education cultivate a whole person or merely a narrow specialist? Do we value wisdom or only wealth and fame? Plato's legacy is not answers, but the eternal questions that he posed with incredible power and clarity. What is justice? What is the nature of reality? What should a true ruler be like? Can virtue be taught? Wherein lies the harmony of the soul? For 2,500 years, Western civilization, consciously or unconsciously, has returned to these questions, building upon them its philosophy, its politics, its ethics, and its art. And perhaps the most personal, the most profound conclusion of this magnificent work brings us back from the state to the individual. At the end of the dialogue, Plato, through the mouth of Socrates, says that it is not so important whether such a city exists anywhere on earth or ever will. What is important is that a pattern of it exists in the heavens, in the world of ideas, and whoever wishes can look upon this pattern and arrange their own inner city according to it. They can live as a citizen of this ideal state, even if chaos reigns all around. Perhaps herein lies the final, quiet, and deep meaning of this entire journey. The most important city that we must build is located within ourselves. It is the city of our soul, and Plato's Republic gives us the perfect plan for its construction. It teaches us to place reason at the head as a wise ruler, to train our will as a loyal warrior, and to order our desires as a hard-working and temperate people. The grand symphony that began with a simple question about justice concludes not with a loud political manifesto, but with the quiet, contemplative melody of inner harmony. The dream of an ideal society becomes a starry compass for the soul, searching for its way in the darkness, and in the light of these distant, unreachable stars, it finds tranquility, order, and its own enduring perfection.